The helicopter blades cut through the desert air with a rhythmic thump that Marcus Rodriguez had heard thousands of times before. As a Navy SEAL medic, he'd been on countless missions, but something about this rescue operation felt different. The intel was sketchy at best. A downed civilian aircraft in hostile territory, possible survivors. 2 minutes out, the pilot's voice crackled through his headset. Marcus checked his medical kit one more time, ensuring every bandage, every vial of morphine, every piece of equipment was exactly where it should be. His teammates were locked and loaded, ready for whatever they might encounter on the ground. The crash site appeared through the dust and heat haze. A small passenger plane twisted and broken against a rocky outcrop. Smoke still rose from the wreckage, but there were no flames. That was good. Marcus's trained eye swept the scene, looking for signs of life, threats, or both. As their helicopter touched down 50 meters from the wreck, Marcus was already moving. His team spread out in a defensive perimeter while he approached the aircraft with his medical bag. The silence was eerie after the constant noise of the helicopter. Only the wind whistling through the damaged metal broke the stillness. "Anyone alive in there?" Marcus called out as he reached the fuselage. The passenger door hung open at an odd angle, and he could see inside the dim interior. 3 bodies were immediately visible. 2 men in business suits who had clearly not survived the impact, and a pilot slumped over the controls. Then he heard it. A soft whimper from the back of the plane. Marcus climbed carefully through the wreckage, his boots crunching on broken glass and debris. In the rear section, partially hidden beneath an overturned seat, he found her. A young woman, maybe early 20s, with long dark hair matted with blood. Her clothes were torn, her left arm bent at an unnatural angle, and her breathing was shallow and rapid. But what struck him most was her eyes. Despite the pain and shock, there was something in them, an alertness, an intelligence that suggested she was more aware of her surroundings than her condition might indicate. Most crash victims he'd treated were either unconscious or delirious with trauma. This woman was watching him, studying him even as he began his initial assessment. "Hey there," Marcus said softly, kneeling beside her. "I'm Marcus. I'm a medic. You're going to be okay. Can you tell me your name?" The woman's lips moved, but no sound came out. She tried again, her face contorting with effort, but still nothing. Marcus noticed the bruising around her throat, possible damage to her vocal cords from the impact, or from being thrown around during the crash. "It's okay. Don't try to talk," he said, gently checking her pulse. It was weak but steady. "I'm going to get you out of here. Can you move your fingers on your right hand?" She flexed her fingers slightly, which was encouraging. Her left arm was definitely broken, possibly in multiple places, but that could be dealt with. What concerned him more was the head injury. There was significant bleeding from a gash near her temple, and he couldn't rule out internal bleeding or brain trauma. As Marcus worked to stabilize her condition, he noticed something odd. Despite being unable to speak, the woman kept pointing at things, first at his medical bag, then at her own injuries, then at the pilot in the front of the plane. Her gestures were precise, deliberate, almost clinical in nature. "Rodriguez, we need to move," came the voice of his team leader through the radio. "Satellite shows vehicles approaching from the east. Could be hostiles." "Copy that," Marcus responded. "I've got 1 survivor preparing for extraction now." He looked back at the woman who had been listening intently to the radio chatter. To his surprise, she was pointing toward the pilot again, more urgently this time. Then she mimed something. With her good hand, it took Marcus a moment to realize she was indicating an injection motion. "The pilot?" Marcus asked. "You think he might still be alive?" The woman nodded emphatically, then pointed to her watch and held up several fingers. Marcus understood. She was trying to tell him how much time had passed since the crash. Information that could be crucial for determining if the pilot had any chance of survival. Moving quickly, Marcus made his way to the cockpit. The pilot looked dead, but as he checked for a pulse, he found the faintest flutter of life. The woman had been right. Without her indication, Marcus would have focused entirely on the obviously living survivor and missed the pilot's barely detectable signs of life. "How did you know?" he muttered, looking back at her with new respect. But there was no time for answers. They needed to get both survivors to the helicopter immediately. Marcus called for assistance from his teammates, and together they carefully extracted both the woman and the pilot from the wreckage. As they carried them toward the helicopter, Marcus noticed the woman continuing to make gestures, pointing at the pilot's head and making circular motions near her own temple. She was trying to communicate something about head trauma, about pressure points, about medical procedures that no ordinary civilian should know. Once they were airborne and heading back to base, Marcus began emergency treatment on both patients. The pilot was in critical condition with severe internal injuries and brain trauma. As Marcus worked on him, the woman, despite her own injuries and inability to speak, kept making subtle gestures indicating where he should check for internal bleeding, how to position the pilot's head to maintain airway clearance, and when to adjust the oxygen levels. It was extraordinary. This woman, who should have been in shock and barely conscious, was essentially helping him treat another patient. Her knowledge of emergency medicine was apparent in every gesture, every pointed indication of where to look for problems or how to address complications. "Who are you?" Marcus wondered aloud as he continued working. The woman met his eyes and tapped her chest, then made a gesture that looked like she was writing. She wanted to tell him something, but without her voice, communication was limited to these frustrating pantomimes. As the helicopter raced toward the military hospital, Marcus found himself more intrigued by his mysterious patient than he'd ever been by anyone he'd rescued. There was clearly much more to her story than appeared on the surface, and he was determined to find out what it was once she recovered enough to communicate properly. The base appeared ahead of them, medical personnel already waiting on the landing pad. Soon he would have help treating both patients, but Marcus knew the real mystery was just beginning. This woman had knowledge and skills that suggested a background far more complex than that of an ordinary plane crash victim. The military hospital at Camp Arifjan buzzed with activity as Marcus wheeled the mystery woman into the emergency treatment bay. The pilot had been rushed into immediate surgery, his chances slim but not impossible thanks to the woman's silent guidance during the flight. Now Marcus found himself focused entirely on his remaining patient, whose condition had stabilized somewhat during transport. Dr. Sarah Chen, the base's head trauma surgeon, took one look at the woman's injuries and immediately began barking orders to the nursing staff. Possible internal bleeding, definite compound fracture of the left arm, head trauma with laceration. Get me a full body scan and prep OR2. As the medical team swarmed around the gurney, Marcus noticed the woman's eyes tracking everything with remarkable clarity. Most patients with her level of trauma would be barely conscious, but she seemed to be cataloging every procedure, every medication being administered, every decision being made by the medical staff. "Any idea who she is?" Dr. Chen asked Marcus as they worked to cut away the woman's clothing to assess her injuries fully. "No identification found at the crash site," Marcus replied. "The plane's manifest listed 4 passengers, but 3 were DOA. She's the only survivor besides the pilot, and she hasn't been able to speak since we found her." Dr. Chen nodded, focusing on her examination. As she checked the woman's abdomen for signs of internal bleeding, something unexpected happened. The patient reached out with her good hand and gently redirected the doctor's touch to a slightly different location, pressing down to indicate a specific spot. "Interesting," Dr. Chen murmured. "She's showing me exactly where it hurts." She pressed the indicated area and felt the slight resistance that suggested internal bruising. "She's right, there's definitely some trauma here that I might have missed in my initial exam." Marcus watched as this pattern repeated throughout the examination. The woman couldn't speak, but she was communicating with medical precision. When Dr. Chen was checking her broken arm, the patient indicated with careful gestures exactly where the breaks were located. When they were assessing her head injury, she pointed to specific areas where she was experiencing pressure or pain. "This is unusual," Dr. Chen whispered to Marcus. "She's displaying medical knowledge that suggests professional training. Look at how she's indicating the location of her radial fracture. She knows exactly which bone is broken and where." The X-rays confirmed what the woman had been trying to communicate. Her left arm had compound fractures of both the radius and ulna, exactly where she had indicated. The head CT showed minor swelling but no life-threatening brain injury, which explained why her cognitive function remained so sharp despite the trauma. While Dr. Chen prepared for surgery to repair the arm fractures, Marcus stayed with the patient. He pulled a chair beside her bed and took out a small notebook and pen. "Since you can't talk right now, maybe you can write," he suggested, offering her the pen. The woman looked at the pen, then at her heavily bandaged and immobilized left arm, then back at Marcus. She made a small gesture with her right hand, indicating that while she could move it, the angle and her position made writing difficult. Marcus adjusted the bed and positioned the notebook so she could reach it more easily. With obvious effort and concentration, she managed to write a single word in shaky but legible handwriting. "Maya, Maya," Marcus repeated. "That's a beautiful name. Maya what? Can you write your last name?" She started to write again, but her hand was shaking from exhaustion and pain medication. The letters came out barely legible. "Patel, Maya Patel," Marcus said. "Okay, we're getting somewhere. Can you tell me what you were doing on that plane?" Maya looked at him for a long moment, then began writing again. This time it took much longer, and Marcus could see the effort was draining what little strength she had left. When she finished, he looked at what she had written. "Doctors Without Borders." Marcus felt a surge of understanding. Doctors Without Borders, that explained everything. Her medical knowledge, her ability to assess injuries, her instinctive understanding of emergency medical procedures. Maya wasn't just a crash victim. She was a trained medical professional who had been traveling to provide humanitarian aid. "You're a doctor," he said, not really asking. Maya nodded weakly. "That's why you knew about the pilot, why you could help me treat him during the flight." She nodded again, then gestured for the notebook. With trembling fingers, she wrote, "Where is he?" "The pilot is in surgery," Marcus told her. "Thanks to your help, we got him here in time. Dr. Chen thinks he has a fighting chance." Maya closed her eyes, clearly relieved. Then she opened them and wrote something else. "Thank you." "No," Marcus said firmly. "Thank you. Without your guidance, we would have lost him. You saved his life even while you were critically injured yourself." Before Maya could respond, Dr. Chen returned with the surgical team. "We're ready to take her up to repair those arm fractures," she announced. "It's going to be a complex procedure. We'll need to insert pins and plates to hold the bones in proper alignment." As they prepared to move Maya to surgery, she grabbed Marcus's hand with surprising strength. When he looked at her, she mouthed something silently. It took him a moment to read her lips, but he understood. "Stay. I'll be here when you wake up," Marcus promised. "I'm not going anywhere." As Maya was wheeled away to surgery, Marcus found himself reflecting on the day's events. He'd rescued hundreds of people over his military career, but never anyone quite like Maya Patel. Her combination of vulnerability and strength, her medical expertise displayed even in the midst of personal crisis, and her immediate concern for another victim, despite her own injuries, all of it pointed to someone truly exceptional. Marcus made his way to the hospital's administrative office to begin the process of notifying Maya's organization about the crash and her condition. But when he tried to contact Doctors Without Borders to report that Dr. Maya Patel had been injured in a plane crash, he encountered an unexpected problem. "I'm sorry," the coordinator on the phone said after checking their records. "We don't have any Dr. Maya Patel currently deployed in that region." "Are you certain that's the name she gave you?" Marcus double-checked his notes. Maya Patel, Doctors Without Borders. That's what she had written clearly in his notebook. But according to the organization's records, no one by that name was traveling on their behalf. A new mystery was emerging. If Maya wasn't who she claimed to be, then who was she really? And why would she lie about her identity even while providing genuine medical assistance? Marcus realized that Maya's recovery would bring answers to questions he hadn't even thought to ask. As he waited for her surgery to conclude, Marcus found himself drawn back to the crash site report. Something didn't add up about the passenger manifest, the flight plan, or the circumstances that had brought Maya to that remote desert location. The more he learned about his mysterious patient, the more questions arose about who she really was and what she had been doing on that doomed flight. The investigation into Maya Patel's true identity was just beginning, and Marcus suspected that when she finally regained her voice, the answers she provided would be more surprising than anything he could have imagined. Maya woke from surgery to find Marcus sitting exactly where he had promised to be, in the chair beside her hospital bed. The late afternoon sun streamed through the medical facility's windows, casting long shadows across the sterile room. Her left arm was now encased in a complex external fixator, metal pins and rods holding her shattered bones in proper alignment. "Hey there," Marcus said softly when he saw her eyes flutter open. "How are you feeling?" Maya tried to speak, but still no sound emerged. She looked frustrated and touched her throat gingerly with her good hand. The swelling from her vocal cord trauma hadn't subsided yet, leaving her trapped in continued silence. Marcus offered her the notebook and pen again. "The surgeon says your arm repair went perfectly. Dr. Chen had to use some innovative techniques, but she's confident you'll regain full function with proper rehabilitation." Maya wrote slowly. "Pilot?" "Good news," Marcus replied with a smile. "He made it through surgery. He's in intensive care but stable. Dr. Chen says it was touch and go, but your quick thinking in the field made the difference." Relief washed over Maya's face. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them and began writing again. This time her message was longer and more detailed. "Need to tell you something important." Marcus leaned forward. "What is it?" Maya paused, seeming to struggle with what she wanted to communicate. Finally she wrote, "Not Doctors Without Borders." "I know," Marcus said gently. "I called them. They don't have anyone named Maya Patel on assignment in this region." Maya's eyes widened with surprise, then narrowed with what looked like concern. She wrote quickly, "How much do you know?" "Very little," Marcus admitted. "I know you're not who you initially claimed to be, but your medical knowledge is clearly real. I know you risked your own recovery to help save the pilot, and I know something about that plane crash doesn't add up to a simple civilian flight gone wrong." Maya studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to decide how much to trust him. Then she began writing, but this time she wrote more slowly, choosing her words carefully. "CIA medical officer." Marcus felt his breath catch. CIA. That changed everything about the situation, about Maya's presence in the desert, about the plane crash itself. "Your agency?" he whispered. Maya nodded, then wrote, "Classified mission, extraction gone wrong." The pieces began falling into place in Marcus's mind. The remote location, the lack of proper passenger manifest information, the sophisticated medical knowledge despite no official record with humanitarian organizations. Maya wasn't a doctor providing aid. She was an intelligence operative with medical training who had been on some kind of covert operation. "What kind of extraction?" Marcus asked quietly. Maya hesitated, then wrote, "American hostage, bioweapons expert kidnapped 6 months ago." Marcus felt the weight of what she was telling him. A bioweapons expert held hostage for 6 months would have been forced to share critical information with hostile forces. The CIA would spare no expense to get someone like that back, especially if they had been developing dangerous biological agents. "Were you successful?" he asked. "And did you get the hostage?" Maya's expression grew grim. She wrote, "Partial success. Got him out, but he didn't make it. Died during extraction." "He was one of the other passengers?" She nodded and wrote, "Dr. James Wright. What's left of his research is in my head." Marcus understood now why Maya had been so concerned about the pilot's condition. If Dr. Wright had died during the extraction, Maya might be the only person left alive who knew what information had been compromised during his captivity. The pilot could be a crucial witness to what had happened during the mission. "What about the other passenger?" Marcus asked. Maya's hand moved across the page with renewed urgency. "Enemy operative. Followed us. Caused the crash." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. This hadn't been an accident or a simple mechanical failure. The plane had been sabotaged or attacked by hostile forces trying to prevent the extraction team from returning with Dr. Wright and whatever intelligence he had provided. So, the pilot might have information about who caused the crash. Maya nodded vigorously and wrote, "He saw everything. They'll try to finish the job." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. If Maya was right, then both she and the pilot were still in danger. The enemy forces who had caused the crash would want to eliminate any witnesses and recover whatever information Dr. Wright had passed along. "I need to inform my command," Marcus said, standing up. "This changes the entire security situation." Maya grabbed his hand with surprising strength and shook her head frantically. She wrote, "No, don't know who to trust. Mission was compromised from the start." Marcus sat back down, processing what she was telling him. If the mission had been compromised from the beginning, It meant there was a leak somewhere in the intelligence community. Maya couldn't trust normal channels because she didn't know who might be working for the other side. "Then what do you want me to do?" he asked. Maya closed her eyes, clearly struggling with pain and exhaustion. When she opened them, she began writing what appeared to be a series of numbers and letters. "Call this number. Ask for handler designation Phoenix, authentication code Bravo 77 Delta." Marcus memorized the sequence as she wrote it. "This is your handler?" She nodded and wrote, "Only person I trust. Tell him Operation Nightingale is blown. Assets compromised. Need immediate extraction." "Operation Nightingale?" Maya pointed to herself, then wrote, "My code name." Marcus looked at this woman, barely out of surgery, unable to speak, probably in considerable pain, who was still operating like the trained intelligence professional she was. Even in her vulnerable state, she was thinking tactically, planning her next moves, trying to protect both herself and the pilot from whatever forces had caused their plane to crash. "There's something else," Marcus said. "Hospital records show your real name, your fingerprints, everything that comes with medical treatment. If someone is looking for you—" Maya's eyes widened in alarm. She wrote quickly, "They'll find me. Need to disappear." "Not necessarily," Marcus said, an idea forming in his mind. "You're in a military medical facility now. I might be able to help keep you off the grid until your handler can arrange proper extraction." Maya looked at him with an expression that mixed hope with wariness. She wrote, "Why help me?" Marcus considered the question. Why was he willing to stick his neck out for someone he'd just met? Someone who had already lied to him once about her identity? The answer came to him clearly. "Because you saved the pilot's life even when you were dying yourself. Because you trusted me enough to tell me the truth when you could have kept lying. And because if there are people out there developing bioweapons, I want them stopped." Maya stared at him for a long moment, then wrote, "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Marcus said grimly. "If your people find out you're here before we can get you out safely, we're both in serious trouble." As if summoned by his words, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed in the hallway outside Maya's room. Marcus moved to the window and peered through the blinds. 3 men in civilian clothes were walking purposefully toward the medical wing, their movements coordinated in a way that suggested military or intelligence training. Marcus turned back to Maya, whose face had gone pale. She had heard the footsteps too, and her expression confirmed what he was already thinking. They had found her. Marcus moved swiftly but quietly, helping Maya sit up in her hospital bed. Despite her injuries and the pain medication, her training kicked in immediately. She understood the danger they were both facing and began preparing to move, even with her arm in the external fixator. "Can you walk?" Marcus whispered. Maya nodded, though he could see the effort it cost her. She pointed to the IV lines connected to her good arm, indicating they needed to be disconnected. Marcus had field medical training, but removing IV lines in a hospital setting would raise immediate alarms with the nursing staff. "There's another way," Marcus said, moving to Maya's bedside computer terminal. As a SEAL medic, he had administrative access to patient records within the military medical system. He quickly pulled up Maya's file and began making changes, altering her room number, changing her status to transferred to another facility, and most importantly, flagging her records as classified under a medical security protocol that would restrict access. Maya watched him work, clearly impressed by his quick thinking. She gestured toward the window, asking silently if there was another way out of the room. The footsteps in the hallway were getting closer. Marcus could hear voices now, professional, clipped conversations that confirmed these weren't ordinary hospital visitors. Through the door's small window, he caught a glimpse of the men speaking with Dr. Chen at the nurses' station. "Looking for the crash survivor from this morning," one of them was saying. "We're with the State Department, here to help with identification and family notification." Marcus knew that was a lie. Real State Department officials would have arrived through proper diplomatic channels, not as unannounced visitors to a military medical facility. These were the hostile operatives Maya had warned him about. He turned back to Maya and pointed toward the bathroom. Military hospital rooms were designed with connecting doors between adjacent patient rooms, accessible through the bathroom areas for emergency situations. If the room next door was empty, they might be able to slip out without being detected. Maya understood immediately. Despite her injuries, she moved with surprising grace and silence. Marcus disconnected her IV carefully, applying pressure to the insertion site to prevent bleeding. Maya's medical training showed as she helped him manage the process without triggering any of the monitoring equipment alarms. They made their way to the bathroom, where Marcus quietly checked the connecting door. It was unlocked and he could see into the adjacent room, empty, with the bed prepared for the next patient but currently unoccupied. As they slipped through the connecting door, they could hear the men entering Maya's original room. Angry voices suggested they had discovered the empty bed and were demanding explanations from the hospital staff. "Where is she?" one voice demanded. "Our intelligence indicated she was brought here this morning." "I'm sorry, but according to our records, that patient was transferred to Walter Reed Medical Center in Washington for specialized care," Dr. Chen replied. Marcus silently thanked his quick thinking in altering Maya's records. "That's impossible," another voice said. "We have reliable intelligence that she's still here." Maya and Marcus crept through the empty room toward the hallway. Marcus peered around the doorframe and saw that the nursing station was in chaos, with the 3 men demanding access to security footage and patient records while Dr. Chen and her staff maintained their story about the transfer. "This way," Marcus whispered, guiding Maya toward a service corridor he knew led to the hospital's physical therapy wing. As a frequent visitor to injured teammates, he was familiar with the building's layout and knew there were multiple exits they could use. Maya was moving well, despite her injuries, but Marcus could see the effort was taking a toll. Perspiration beaded on her forehead and her breathing was becoming labored. They needed to find a safe place for her to rest while he figured out their next move. The physical therapy wing was quiet in the late afternoon, most of the staff having moved to other duties. Marcus found an empty treatment room and helped Maya sit down on one of the therapy tables. She immediately reached for the notebook he had brought with them and began writing. "Need to contact Phoenix," she wrote. "They'll keep looking until they find me." Marcus nodded. "I'll make the call, but I need to do it from a secure line. The hospital phones might be monitored now." Maya wrote, "Use satellite phone, emergency kit, and helicopter." That was smart thinking. Military helicopters carried emergency communication equipment that operated on encrypted satellite networks. If Marcus could get to their helicopter without being detected, he could make contact with Maya's handler using secure channels. "What about you?" Marcus asked. "I can't leave you here alone." Maya considered this, then wrote, "Pilot, check on him first. If they find him..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. If the hostile operatives discovered that the pilot had survived and might have witnessed what caused the crash, they would almost certainly try to eliminate him. The intensive care unit would be heavily monitored, but it might also be the safest place for Maya to hide temporarily. "You want to go to the ICU?" Marcus asked. Maya nodded and wrote, "Medical staff. Harder for them to operate openly." She was right. Whatever these operatives were planning, they would have difficulty conducting lethal operations in a busy intensive care unit, filled with medical personnel and security cameras. Marcus helped Maya back to her feet, and they made their way through the service corridors toward the ICU. As they moved, Marcus couldn't help but admire Maya's tactical thinking. Even injured and unable to speak, she was planning several moves ahead, considering angles he hadn't thought of. They reached the ICU without incident. The pilot, whose name Marcus had learned was Captain Robert Hayes, was in a private room surrounded by monitoring equipment. He was unconscious but stable, with bandages covering multiple injuries from the crash. Maya moved immediately to his bedside and began checking his vital signs with professional efficiency. Even with her left arm immobilized, she was able to assess his condition using techniques Marcus recognized from advanced combat medical training. She turned to Marcus and wrote, "He's stable, but they gave him something." "What do you mean?" Maya pointed to the IV bag hanging beside the pilot's bed, then wrote, "Not standard post-surgical medications, something to keep him unconscious." Marcus examined the IV setup more closely. Maya was right. There were medications being administered that weren't typical for post-operative care. Someone had been keeping Captain Hayes sedated beyond what was medically necessary. "The hospital staff?" Marcus asked quietly. Maya shook her head and wrote, "Someone with access changed his medications." The implications were chilling. If someone had infiltrated the hospital's medical system enough to alter a patient's treatment, then nowhere in the facility was truly safe. Maya and the pilot were both in immediate danger, and Marcus was now involved whether he wanted to be or not. Maya grabbed his arm and wrote urgently, "They're inside the hospital, we need to get him out." Marcus looked at Captain Hayes' condition, multiple injuries, connected to various monitoring devices requiring careful medical supervision. Moving him would be extremely risky, potentially fatal if not done properly, but leaving him here to be slowly poisoned by whoever had altered his medication regimen would be worse than risky. It would be murder. How? Marcus asked. Maya was already moving, checking the medical equipment around the pilot's bed. Despite her own injuries, her training as both a medical professional and an intelligence operative was taking over. She wrote quickly, "Medical evacuation, make it look official." Marcus understood. If they could create a legitimate-seeming medical emergency, they could evacuate both Maya and the pilot using standard hospital protocols. But they would need help from someone they could trust completely. As if reading his thoughts, Maya wrote one more message. "Call Phoenix now. Tell him Nightingale and Witness need immediate extraction. Hostile forces inside the wire." Marcus realized there was no turning back now. He was fully committed to helping Maya and Captain Hayes escape from whatever forces were hunting them. The only question was whether he could reach Maya's handler before their enemies realized where they were hiding. Marcus left Maya watching over Captain Hayes while he made his way to the helicopter landing pad. The satellite communication equipment was housed in a locked compartment, but his security clearance gave him access. As he powered up the encrypted satellite phone, he rehearsed the message Maya had given him, knowing he would only get one chance to make contact with her handler. The phone connected after several long minutes of satellite handshake protocols. A voice answered with a simple, "Go." "I need to speak to handler designation Phoenix," Marcus said. "Authentication code Bravo 77 Delta." There was a pause, then, "Phoenix here." "Who is this?" "Navy SEAL medic Marcus Rodriguez. I have Nightingale and a witness. Operation Nightingale is blown. Assets compromised. Hostile forces are inside the wire at Camp Arifjan Medical Facility." The voice on the other end immediately became sharp and focused. "What's Nightingale's condition?" "Stable but injured. Left arm fractures, vocal cord trauma, but mobile and alert. The witness is sedated. Someone altered his medications to keep him unconscious. I believe there are at least 3 hostile operatives inside the hospital looking for them." "Understood. What's your assessment of immediate threat level?" Marcus looked back toward the medical facility. "High. They've penetrated hospital security and have access to patient records and medical systems. Nightingale believes the mission was compromised from the start." There was a longer pause before Phoenix responded. "Rodriguez, I'm going to need you to maintain asset security until extraction can be arranged. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." "Good. There's a safe house 12 kilometers north of your position. GPS coordinates are 29.372N, 47.981E. Can you get both assets there safely?" Marcus memorized the coordinates. "That depends on transportation and medical support for the witness. He's in critical condition and can't be moved without proper equipment." "Understood. There's a medical evacuation helicopter that can be diverted to your location in 40 minutes. The crew has been briefed and will provide full medical support during transport." "How do I identify friendly forces?" "The helicopter will use call sign Shadowhawk. The pilot will authenticate with the phrase, 'Phoenix sends his regards. Do not trust any other extraction attempts.'" "Copy that." "What about the hostile operatives?" Phoenix's voice hardened. "Leave that to us. Focus on keeping Nightingale and the witness alive until extraction. Phoenix out." The line went dead. Marcus secured the communication equipment and hurried back to the ICU, his mind racing with plans for getting Maya and Captain Hayes out of the hospital safely. 40 minutes wasn't much time to prepare, especially if the hostile operatives were still searching the facility. When he returned to the ICU, he found Maya had made changes to Captain Hayes' medical setup. She had somehow managed to switch out his IV medications using supplies from the unit's emergency cart. The pilot's color was already improving, and his vital signs showed signs of stabilization. Maya looked up when Marcus entered and pointed to her notebook. "Called Phoenix," she had written. "Extraction in 40 minutes, Marcus whispered. "Medical helicopter with full support. But we need to get you both out of this room without being detected." Maya nodded and wrote, "He's waking up, drugs wearing off." Indeed, Captain Hayes was showing signs of consciousness. His eyelids were fluttering, and his breathing had become more regular. Maya moved closer to him, checking his pupils and pulse with professional efficiency. "Captain Hayes," Marcus said softly, "can you hear me?" The pilot's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first but gradually sharpening as he became aware of his surroundings. He tried to speak, but only managed a hoarse whisper. "Easy," Marcus said. "You were in a plane crash, you're in a military hospital, but you're safe now." Captain Hayes looked confused, his gaze moving from Marcus to Maya and back again. When he saw Maya's injuries and the external fixator on her arm, recognition dawned in his eyes. The mission," he whispered. "They shot us down." Maya quickly wrote on her notebook and showed it to him. "Who shot you down?" Captain Hayes struggled to focus on the words. "Two aircraft, military helicopters, but wrong markings. They came out of nowhere after we left the extraction site." Marcus felt his blood run cold. Military helicopters meant this wasn't just a terrorist operation or criminal enterprise. This was a state-sponsored attack on a CIA mission. The implications were staggering. Maya wrote frantically, "Did you see the markings?" "Russian," Captain Hayes whispered. "But that's impossible. We were supposed to be in friendly airspace." Maya and Marcus exchanged glances. If Russian forces had intercepted the extraction mission, it meant the operation had been compromised at the highest levels. Dr. writes, "Kidnapping and the bioweapons information he carried were apparently valuable enough to risk an international incident." "Captain," Marcus said urgently, "we need to get you out of here. There are hostile operatives in the hospital looking for you and Maya. Can you move?" Hayes tried to sit up but winced in pain. "My ribs. I think several are broken, and my head feels like it's splitting open." Maya examined him quickly and wrote, "Concussion, broken ribs, but mobile if we're careful." At that moment, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed in the ICU corridor. Marcus moved to the door and peered through the small window. The three men from earlier were talking to the ICU charge nurse, showing what appeared to be official identification. "Federal agents," one of them was saying. "We need to check on the pilot from this morning's crash, national security matter." Maya grabbed Marcus's arm and pointed toward the room's window. They were on the second floor, but there was a maintenance ladder visible outside that led down to a service area behind the building. "Can we move him that way?" Marcus asked quietly. Maya assessed Captain Hayes' condition again and nodded. She wrote, "Risky but possible. Need to immobilize his ribs first." Working quickly and quietly, Maya used medical tape and gauze from the room's supplies to create a makeshift chest binding for the pilot. Her medical expertise showed even with her limited mobility, she knew exactly how to stabilize his injuries for transport while maintaining his ability to breathe properly. "This is going to hurt," Marcus warned Captain Hayes as they helped him sit up. "Everything hurts already," the pilot replied with a weak smile. "Just get us out of here." The voices in the corridor were getting closer. Marcus could hear the fake federal agents asking specific questions about the pilot's room number and current condition. They would be at the door within minutes. Maya had finished her field treatment of Captain Hayes and was gathering the few medical supplies they might need. Despite her own injuries, she was thinking tactically, planning for contingencies that might arise during their escape. Marcus opened the room's window as quietly as possible. The maintenance ladder was about 3 feet away, manageable for someone in good health, potentially deadly for 2 injured people trying to escape in broad daylight. "I'll go first," Marcus whispered. "Maya, you help the captain get to the window, then I'll assist both of you down." Maya shook her head and wrote quickly, "You help him. I go last. Cover your retreat." Marcus wanted to argue, but he could see the determination in her eyes. Even injured and unable to speak, Maya was still thinking like the intelligence operative she was, protecting her assets and ensuring mission success over personal safety. The footsteps stopped directly outside their door. Marcus heard the fake agent speaking to someone, probably getting a key card from hospital security. "Now," he whispered. Marcus climbed through the window and made the short leap to the maintenance ladder. The metal rungs were old and slightly corroded, but they held his weight. He positioned himself to help Captain Hayes make the transition. The pilot moved slowly but steadily, clearly fighting through significant pain. Maya supported him from inside the room, using her good arm to guide him toward the window. When Hayes reached the opening, Marcus grabbed his hands and helped pull him across the gap to the ladder. Just as Captain Hayes's feet touched the ladder rungs, they heard the sound of the room's door opening behind them. "Where is everyone?" a voice demanded. "The patient was supposed to be here." Maya was still inside the room. Marcus looked up and saw her preparing to make the jump to the ladder, but the voices were right behind her now. If she tried to climb through the window, she would be caught in the act. Instead, Maya did something that surprised both Marcus and Captain Hayes. She moved away from the window and sat down in the visitor's chair beside the empty bed, picking up a magazine as if she had been waiting there all along. When the three operatives entered the room, they found what appeared to be a female patient visiting an empty ICU room. Maya's hospital gown and visible injuries made her look like just another patient, and her inability to speak meant she couldn't accidentally reveal anything even under questioning. "Where's the pilot?" one of the agents demanded. Maya looked up at them with apparent confusion and pointed to her throat, indicating she couldn't speak. She shrugged and gestured toward the empty bed as if to say she didn't know where the patient had gone. From his position on the ladder, Marcus watched through the window as Maya played her role perfectly. The operatives were clearly frustrated, but they couldn't treat an injured patient too aggressively without drawing unwanted attention from hospital staff. Iegi. The maintenance tunnels beneath Camp Arifjan's medical facility were a maze of pipes, electrical conduits, and service corridors that most people never saw. Marcus led Maya and Captain Hayes through the dimly lit passages, using his knowledge of the base layout to navigate toward the helicopter landing pad. Captain Hayes was struggling but determined. His breathing labored from the broken ribs Maya had bound with medical tape. Every few minutes, Maya would stop to check his condition. Her professional assessment communicated through quick gestures and concerned looks. As they reached a junction in the tunnel system, Marcus held up his hand for them to stop. Voices echoed from somewhere above. The hostile operatives were clearly expanding their search beyond the hospital building itself. Maya pulled out her notebook and wrote, "How much time?" Marcus checked his watch. 12 minutes until Shadowhawk arrives. They continued through the tunnels, emerging through a maintenance access point near the base's motor pool. From here they could see the helicopter landing pad about 200 meters away across open ground. It was the most dangerous part of their escape route. No cover, nowhere to hide if they were spotted. Maya studied the terrain, then wrote, "Need distraction, draw them away from landing pad." "What kind of distraction?" Marcus asked quietly. Maya pointed to herself and wrote, "They want me alive. I show myself. They follow." Marcus shook his head immediately. "Too dangerous. You're injured and can't even call for help if something goes wrong." Maya grabbed his arm and wrote urgently, "Pilot has the information they need about who shot down the plane. He's more important than me." Captain Hayes, who had been following their silent conversation, spoke up despite his pain. "She's right. I saw the helicopter markings, the faces of the pilots. I can identify the unit that attacked us." Marcus realized Maya was making a tactical decision based on mission priorities. Captain Hayes was the key witness who could expose the foreign involvement in the attack on their extraction mission. Maya was willing to sacrifice herself to ensure he survived to tell his story. "There's another way," Marcus said, an idea forming. "We create a medical emergency." He pulled out his radio and switched to the hospital's emergency frequency. "Medical emergency, code blue in the psychiatric wing. All available personnel respond immediately." Within moments, alarms began blaring throughout the medical facility. Emergency personnel would be rushing toward the false alarm, creating chaos and confusion that would provide perfect cover for their escape. "That should keep everyone busy for a few minutes," Marcus said. Let's move. They made their way across the open ground toward the landing pad, moving as quickly as Captain Hayes' injuries allowed. Maya stayed close to the pilot, ready to provide medical support if his condition deteriorated. As they reached the edge of the landing pad, Marcus heard the distinctive sound of approaching rotor blades. Right on schedule, a military medical helicopter appeared in the distance, approaching from the north. But something was wrong. As the aircraft got closer, Marcus could see it wasn't displaying the standard medical markings he expected. This helicopter was black, unmarked, and approaching much faster than a medical evacuation would normally fly. Maya saw it too and immediately grabbed Marcus's arm, shaking her head frantically. She wrote quickly, "Not extraction, hostile aircraft." Marcus pulled both Maya and Captain Hayes toward the nearest cover, a concrete barrier beside the landing pad. As the black helicopter swept overhead, he could see armed figures inside preparing to fast rope down to the ground. "This is bad," Captain Hayes whispered. "That's the same type of aircraft that shot us down." Maya was writing rapidly. "They found us, need backup." Marcus keyed his radio to the base security frequency. "This is SEAL Team Medic Rodriguez. We have hostile aircraft inbound to the medical facility landing pad. Request immediate response." The response came back within seconds. "Rodriguez, we show no unauthorized aircraft in our airspace. Please confirm your location and status." Marcus realized with a sinking feeling that the hostile forces had somehow spoofed the base's air traffic control systems. The black helicopter wasn't showing up on their radar, which meant it was using sophisticated electronic warfare equipment to mask its presence. As the aircraft settled onto the landing pad, armed figures in tactical gear began deploying. Marcus counted at least 6 operatives, all carrying military-grade weapons and moving with professional precision. Maya tapped his shoulder and showed him her notebook. "Russian Spetsnaz recognized the equipment." Captain Hayes nodded grimly. "Same uniforms as the pilots who shot us down." Marcus realized they were facing a much larger operation than he had initially understood. This wasn't just a few hostile operatives trying to clean up loose ends. This was a full military operation designed to eliminate witnesses and recover whatever intelligence Dr. Wright had provided before his death. "We need to get out of here," Marcus said, but even as he spoke, he could see more tactical teams approaching from multiple directions. They had been completely surrounded. That's when the sound of a second helicopter filled the air. This one approached from the south, and Marcus could see the medical cross markings he had been expecting earlier. As it came closer, he heard a voice over the radio. "This is Shadowhawk requesting permission to land. Phoenix sends his regards." The extraction helicopter Maya's handler had promised was finally arriving, but it was flying directly into what had become a combat zone. Marcus watched as the 2 aircraft faced each other across the landing pad. The unmarked black helicopter filled with hostile operatives, and the medical evacuation helicopter that was supposed to be their salvation. Maya was writing frantically. "Shadowhawk doesn't know situation. They'll be shot down." Marcus keyed his radio to warn the incoming helicopter, but before he could speak, the situation escalated dramatically. The Russian operatives opened fire on Shadowhawk, their weapons creating bright muzzle flashes in the late afternoon sun. But the medical helicopter wasn't defenseless. Return fire erupted from its side doors, and Marcus realized this wasn't a standard medical evacuation aircraft. It was a military rescue helicopter disguised as a medical transport, complete with defensive weaponry and trained door gunners. The firefight that followed was brief but intense. The Russian helicopter, caught off guard by the armed response from Shadowhawk, tried to lift off and escape. But the American aircraft was already in position, and its superior firepower quickly disabled the enemy helicopter's engines. As the black aircraft made an emergency landing at the far end of the pad, Shadowhawk touched down near Marcus, Maya, and Captain Hayes. The side door slid open, revealing medical personnel and armed security specialists. "Let's go," one of them shouted. "We don't have much time before enemy reinforcements arrive." Marcus helped Captain Hayes to his feet, while Maya gathered her few possessions. As they ran toward the helicopter, Maya suddenly stopped and grabbed Marcus's arm. She pointed back toward the disabled Russian aircraft, where several operatives were escaping on foot. She wrote quickly, "They'll report back. Mission still compromised." Marcus understood what she meant. Even if they escaped now, the enemy forces knew that both Maya and Captain Hayes had survived. The intelligence Maya carried about Dr. Wright's research and the captain's testimony about the attack would still be targets for future operations. But as they climbed aboard Shadowhawk and the helicopter lifted off, Maya did something that surprised everyone. She pulled out a small device that Marcus hadn't seen before, something that looked like a standard medical device but was clearly much more sophisticated. She showed it to the medical team leader and wrote, "Dr. Wright's research data, everything he learned during captivity." The team leader's eyes widened. "You've had this the entire time?" Maya nodded and wrote, "Backup plan, hidden in medical equipment at crash site, retrieved while you were treating my arm." Marcus stared at her with new admiration. Even while critically injured and unable to speak, Maya had managed to recover the crucial intelligence from the crash site without anyone noticing. She had been protecting the mission's primary objective all along, even while appearing to be helpless. As Shadowhawk flew toward the safe house, Captain Hayes looked at Maya with obvious respect. "You saved the mission," he said, "and probably saved my life too." Maya smiled and wrote one final message in her notebook. "Team effort. Couldn't have done it without a good medic." Marcus realized that Maya had been testing him from the moment they met, evaluating whether he could be trusted, whether he had the skills and judgment to help her complete her mission. Her initial deception about working for Doctors Without Borders had been a cover story, but her assessment of his character had been very real. 3 months later, Marcus received a letter with no return address. Inside was a simple note, voice fully recovered, "Thank you for everything." Attached was a newspaper clipping about the successful prosecution of an international bioweapons smuggling ring, with testimony from key witnesses helping to expose a network that had been operating across multiple countries. The article mentioned that crucial evidence had been recovered from a plane crash, leading to arrests and the shutdown of several illegal research facilities. Marcus smiled as he read the article. He never learned the full details of Operation Nightingale, or what happened to Maya.